7 is everybody's third temple opinions or their beliefs of the third temple come from this verse right here.
What is the third
And
temple for people who don't know what we're talking about?
so, third temple belief is a belief that a certain group of Christians, which is most Christians, they believe that there's a third temple coming to usher in the second coming of Christ. But through our research, the community of the little season, we've found that this verse actually matches up perfectly with the falling of the second temple, where in this verse it talks about the 7 year tribulation, right? Where that's where we get the idea of a tribulation from, and the temple falling 3.5 years into that war. And once you go through the slide, you'll see that the second temple did fall 3.5 years into that 7 year war. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see 70 AD and then
Oh, okay.
the 7 year Roman Jewish war. And this prophecy, Daniel, right? So you know about Solomon building the first temple.
72 demons, right? And
Yes. So he used the demons, right, to obviously build a temple. And then it was this great temple, but then Babylon came in and then destroyed the temple. And then while Daniel was in captivity of Babylon, he was writing about a future temple. So if you read Daniel 7, the whole chapter, he talks about the future temple being built, and then how once there's a decree to put in the temple being built, the temple's going to be built in a good time, a good period, and then it'll be destroyed 3.5 years into a 7 year war, which is where we get this, right? And the prophecy is 490 years old. So if you go back to the first slide, you'll see that there's no space for a church gap. So you see how there's the 7 weeks, then the 62 weeks, which weeks 69 weeks, and that's when Jesus Christ is cut off. So we only have 1 week left, but then people today are believing that there's a 2,000 year period in there when the prophecy is only 490 years.
Wait a second. So just to recap, so the 7 years is 1 week, and so we're counting every week as 7 years. So where in this timeline, it's labeled as false view. What does that mean?
So this is the 70-week prophecy. So like you said, every week is 7 years, and 7 times 70 is 490. So that's where you get the 490-year prophecy, which if you do the timing, the second temple falling matches up perfectly with this prophecy. But if you are looking at through a third temple point of view, expecting the third temple today to usher in the second coming, you now have to add 2,000 years between week 69 and 70, which obviously isn't in the prophecy.
So it goes from 2000. So it goes from 70 AD to what? Presumably 2070.
2070.
Right, because if it starts at 70 AD, what you saying it's 2,000 years from?
No. According to the people who are Christians not believing in the little season.
Got you. Okay.
So
okay.
Yeah. So if I wasn't in a little season and I thought Christ was coming back today for his second coming, and it didn't happen, I would have to believe in the third temple, because the temple that was already written about fell. So that would have to mean Christ already came back if I'm not right. So that's where you get this idea of Christ coming back. And that, obviously there's way more verses and we're going to get into that, but people need to understand this verse first and realize that this prophecy was about a future temple, which was about the next temple, and the next temple was not built yet. So once that next temple was built, it said to fall 3.5 years in that 7 year war, which did happen. But then when you ask people, what was that biblically? They're just, there's really no explanation, which is unfortunate, because if Jesus says multiple times he's coming back in that generation, he's telling his apostles they'll see his second coming, why is it that it's not that generation when it fulfills prophecy?
I see what you're saying here. So the second temple was reconstructed, and then it fell in 70 AD, which is 3.5 years into this Roman war.
Mm-hmm.
And
against the Jew people.
Right. And so that was fulfillment of the prophecy of the reign of Jesus Christ. And so that's when we see the gap, which is presumably the church age. So that's the reign. Is that the millennial reign of Jesus, which happens after 70 AD?
So here, if you keep going on the slides, so
Sure.
we'll go to this slide right here. These are Josephus and Tacitus, right? So these are our two best first century historians. One is Roman and one is a Roman Jew. And Josephus is sources for the crucifixion. So he is our best source for Christ and his crucifixion and knowing he's a real historical source.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the reason why we even are able to prove Christ is historically true is because of Josephus. So as you can see right here in the screenshots, if you just Google it or if you read their books, Josephus and Tacitus during that 7-year war all saw angels and chariots in the sky fighting. So, and then later on, as you can see in this first screenshot, the pseudo Hipsius, I can't really say his name because it's Latin. He
I guess
was,
Scipius. Yeah.
yeah, Hipsius. So he was rewriting a documentation of Josephus of the war, and he was translating it from Hebrew to Latin. And in this translation that he was writing from, he not only said there was angels and chariots, but there was a massive figure seen by many people that was scary looking. And we know when Jesus comes back, he comes back scary, he comes back with an iron rod, he comes back to judge. So if you have a 7-year tribulation, and then the temple falling 3.5 years, and then in the sky, there's angels and chariots, and then a big scary figure in the sky, what other possibility do we have to assume that is biblically? Like,
Right.
because we have to give, if we are serving the God that has an almighty purpose and nothing is coincidental, right? Everything has to be a biblical prophecy or a biblical meaning, because then what's the point of having prophecy if this is just going to happen and this is not the second coming, it's just 2,000 years later. You
Right.
know
So
what I
you're
mean?
saying the second coming already happened in 70 AD during this war. So Jesus already came back, because I do know the scripture you're talking about. I don't remember the exactly where it comes from, but it's in the Gospels. He says your generation will see this prophecy come to pass, when he's basically prophesying before John, the revelation.
Yeah.
And
So
so he comes back with this rod. He comes back with his eyes of fire, the seven candles, the seven stars.
the
That's
verse you're
fascinating.
referring to would be Matthew 24:34, where he's like, truly I say to you, this generation shall not pass until they see these signs happen.
Right.
And if you even, we can get into it anyways. Starting with Matthew 24, that's where he lists all the signs, right? So every sign you get of his second coming is in chapter 24. And he starts 24 off by talking about how the second temple will fall and not one stone will be laid upon another. And then he says, that will be the sign of my coming. So then the apostles ask him, what else are the signs of the second temple falling? So then he lists all the signs of the second temple falling. And then he says, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. If you think about it, if he says the second temple falls before his second coming, and then he lists all the signs that have to happen before the second temple falls. If the second temple already fell, all the signs must have happened before that. So therefore, those verses had to have happened already, unless Jesus was alive, because that would have to be a contradiction in his word.
So this puts Revelation into a whole different perspective, because people think that what we're going to see is, you said, the third temple fall, Jesus will return, and it's going to be like the first few chapters of Revelation, where he's going to talk about the seven churches of Asia, and he's going to return with a flaming sword. And okay, I'm curious now, because I've never heard anybody say this before. If Jesus came back for the second coming, what happened after he returned, and where would the historical evidence for that be? Is it hidden? What happened after he returned in 70 AD, presumably?
So we can scroll through, and we can
Sure,
just go back to the things
definitely.
in here. So
Just let me know where to stop.
just you can stop right there. Go back to that. Okay, so as you can see, this is all Rome. This is Rome being buried. So we'll start off here where Rome was buried, and then we see the Dark Ages, right? The 1,000-year Dark Ages, where according to the mainstream timeline, there was 1,000 years of no advancement in technology. no advancement in medicine, architecture. People were dying before 30. You couldn't give birth without dying. You couldn't even steal an apple without having the worst medieval tortures done to you.
Right.
So what we're taught is that these people are, worse. Somehow we were super advanced. We went from Roman architecture, Roman concrete to Dark Ages. So first off, that should be suspicious. But then you look at the building. So if we swipe through, go ahead on the slides. So one more.
Okay.
Okay, so you see all these cathedrals that are all dedicated to Christ. They're all built during the 1,000-year Dark Ages, where these people are barely even alive. And the ones that are alive are either super sick, they're living in wood huts, or they're, they're fighting wars because that's what they did back then, I guess. So the architecture for our timeline that we're taught makes no sense because we have these amazing buildings that were built during the 1,000-year Dark Ages, which I should be explaining. When Christ comes back, people think it's new heaven and earth, right? But when he comes back, there's a 1,000-year reign. And then after the 1,000-year reign, Satan is released. But during that 1,000-year reign, there's resurrected saints, and Jesus rules with an iron rod. So that's why you get the cathedrals that all represent Christ. That's why all these cathedrals have the dating. If once we'll see down later in the slides, they'll all say the date 1,000 years. So as
Right. Let
you
me see if
right,
I can find that.
go back, one more, one more. So right here. So this is a cathedral in Ukraine, and oh no, sorry, this is in Chicago,
Oh,
and
Chicago.
yeah, it's a Ukrainian cathedral in Chicago, and it's dated by the 1,000-year millennium. And then you have all these old buildings that were buried that have the datings J and then three numbers after it. So it would have been, say the date was J 950, it would have been 950 years into the 1,000 years of Jesus. So if you go ahead
Got you. So
on the slide,
it wouldn't be 1070. It would be 1,000 years after the second coming.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. So go one more, right? Go ahead, keep going. I'll
Sorry.
tell you when to stop. No,
Sorry
you're
about
good.
that. Wait, was it this one? No,
No, no,
no,
no.
that's this song.
You're going backwards. Go
Oh,
forward.
go forward. Okay.
Yeah. So, okay, right here. So as you can see, there's coins too all around the world where there would be a J or an I, and I would be Jesus in Latin for Christ, right? Because Jesus in Latin would be just Jesus, or Greek would be Jesus, and in English we have Jesus. So you see these coins, and they don't say one, but then we know that the timeline tells us it's a one, because as you can see on all the Google searches, it'll tell you it's 1736. It won't tell you it's J 736. So during the 1,000 years where Christ came back, clearly,
Wait, so the calendar, so everything with the calendar then changes because then it's based off of the second. Which we're assuming everything that the correct dates now are AD after death, but in reality it's J. You said 736, so that's the 736 year after the return of Christ.
well, it's interesting because AD means Anno Domini in Latin, which means year of our Lord. So it's not actually referring to when he dies. It's saying year of our Lord, which to me seems like it's actually referring to when he came back.
What? Wait, so how does that? How do we?
I
How
mean,
do we place the original resurrection of Christ, right, which is supposed to be the beginning of the calendar, right, with 70 AD? If the year of our Lord is it counting back since the resurrection or counting back since the second coming?
right. Well, the way they went about it, we wouldn't know today because
Okay.
we're being obviously taught different. The things they were being taught, evolution and all that stuff, that they were not being taught that. The timeline was different, obviously. But think about it, because AD and BC, that's a new thing. That didn't happen until the Dark Ages. The world used to go before BC and AD, they used to go off the beginning of light. So essentially when Adam and Eve started. they were going off that timeline. But then think about it. The whole world, for some reason, decided to go off when Jesus was born and the year of our Lord, which, if you think about it, the whole world was restarted. And the people that were left were like, okay, well, this whole world is destroyed. So we know that people just spread the gospel saying that the whole world's going to be destroyed. We only know we have revelation. So if we look at around and go, okay, this looks exactly like Revelation just happened, we don't know what year we're in or how to restart. So let's just go based off of that.
So you're saying humanity was reset at the beginning of our AD calendar, and they were picking up the remnants of the past civilization.
Exactly. That's where you get things out of nowhere of technology, architecture just being uncovered, and then
right, they can't replicate it. Architecture.
And I went to school for masonry, so I'm telling
you did.
Yeah. As somebody who's been to school
we got to talk about that later on after we do that, because that's interesting, man. Okay.
That's one of the big proofs of this is the fact that the buildings we cannot replicate, and that these buildings were all built during the 1,000-year Dark Ages. And then we know that the 1,000-year Dark Ages had no architecture advancement. So how do we go from... Go ahead.
For clarity for the viewership, when we say the 1,000 year of the Dark Ages, that's not referring to the millennial reign. That's referring to the 1,000 years after the millennial reign, or
no, that is the 1,000-year Dark Ages. So the 1,000-year Dark Ages is the millennial reign. They just recalled it the 1,000-year Dark Ages because, and I think it's Isaiah. He's like, woe to those who call bitter sweet and sweet bitter, dark good and light, dark light and light dark, and good evil and evil bad. So what would the evil controllers of the world do if the 1,000 years of light just happened? They would call it the Dark Ages.
Dude, that is so crazy. So the whole thing is that growing up in a public education system, which is something that happened to me, we hear about the Dark Ages being this time of what happens after the Dark Ages, the Enlightenment, right? Everybody's suddenly enlightened and there's this humanistic movement. Well, the Dark Ages is a time of Inquisition, Christianity's evil. That's all you only learn about European Christianity, the witch trials, all of this stuff, right? And so that's actually when you see Freemasonry or the Knights Templar forming. It's during this Dark Age period because they have to stay under the cover of, they can't be out and about in society. Nowadays you have Freemasons running about, well, if you got Shaquille O'Neal with the Freemasonry ring, just being like, literally. Yeah, man, I believe the earth is flat. Like crazy stuff like that.
And the reason why they're called secret societies is because the 1,000 years of Christ was happening. So if you were any other religion, if you worshiped any other God, you would be punished. So they had to be secret societies. They had to meet underground. That's where...
So a caveat on that is like Islam, right? Islam dates back to, I think, about 560 AD. I don't know if that's the correct year. So he's the false prophet. That's in the middle, right? That's almost 500 years exactly after 700 AD, 70 AD. So what is all that about?
So
okay, go.
We have this more like a scholar. So a historian scholar. His name is Gunnar Heisen. He was a German scholar who he corrected the timeline. So I don't know if you've heard Flavenko. He's a mathematician who set our timelines off by 1,000 years. And this scholar said it's not off by 1,000, it's off by 700. And Islam is around like the 7th century. So it would have been like 700 years, 700 AD, according to our timeline. So if you do the 700-year timeline, where they added 700 years to hide the 1,000 years of Jesus, right? If you take away the 700 years, you put Islam 1st century. So Islam came around the same time Christ was around. So if you think about it, he fits perfectly for the false prophet. And Nero, who was the emperor of the 7-year war, he fits perfectly for the Antichrist because he was 666 in Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, and Latin.
Right, and you're talking about gematria here, which is for people who don't know gematria, it's basically the Hebrew language and lettering correlates with numbers, and so it's actually a very Jewish practice to number down these phrases and things or words into numbers that have meaning or spiritual meaning.
But then that brings a whole new perspective. That's what really changed my perspective of Revelation, is that because you think about it, okay, why is John writing in code? For anybody who's read Revelation, you realize that it's being written in code. For example, he says, let him who hath understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is 666. Or let him who hath wisdom know that the beast has 7 hills and has 7 kings. And the 7 heads of the beast represent 7 hills. So he's speaking in code. The reason why he's speaking in code is because John was in Patmos, in captivity of Rome. So when he's writing these letters to the 7 churches of Asia, if he's specifically writing about Rome, saying the beast is Rome, Christ is going to come back and destroy Rome, the Antichrist is Emperor Nero, those letters would never have gotten out. So there's a reason why he's writing in code and writing in Hebrew gematria, so that the people that read these know exactly what to do with them. Because why would he write in code 2,000 years later, for people 2,000 years later? Especially if we know that there's an Antichrist coming, supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
It's not being hidden. It's not being censored. We have millions of Christian content creators every day posting about it. But then you have people who post about the little season who get censored all the time. So obviously, if he had to censor himself, why is he worried about censoring himself if 2,000 years later we're not being censored for the truth he was censoring?
So there's 2 things I want to get into here. The first one, and feel free to answer this in any order, but the first one is you mentioned somebody who had changed our calendar by 700 years. I want to know if you know the reasoning behind that, where people can find this information, because I think this is fast. That flips every notion of the history books that we've been taught on its head. And the second part of that is going to be the Antichrist, right? So Nero was 666. Nero was the Antichrist, or the beast, rather, right? And I know some people think of these as different entities. I've heard of different things. Apollyon being different from the beast, being different from Satan, and I think there's truth to that. I want to get on to what that means for current Revelation. So if you could first go over the calendar aspect thing, and then kind of get on to, is there going to be another Antichrist, or what are we looking at possibly for the future, right? And if you want to continue on this way of thinking as well, we can do that, because I'm very fascinated about all the proofing behind the mud flood theory and all this stuff with the calendar.
So to answer the first one, so you said the 700 years, right? So okay, so can we go back
To
on
slide?
slides? Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going. So, all right, we'll go to the 18 months. So go forward a little bit. Yeah, so right here. So, okay. The way I can explain it is this easy. The easiest way to explain it is if here, I'll just grab chest. So
That's crazy. The sun was out for a year and a half.
yeah, and obviously that did not happen in 536 AD. So I'm not sure who added 700 years to the timeline. I'm not sure if it was just the people who started the school system, and then that's just what we've been taught since. I don't know if the people who made our timeline just were given the wrong, since they were told the wrong information, they're just doing the best what they possibly can with the wrong information they have. But all I do know is that that time has been added. So, for example, this 18 months where the sun goes out. So, say this event is all of these 3 chapsticks, right? But say these 3 chapsticks are the second temple falling and the angels being in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Then this is the sun going out 18 months and volcanoes going off. And then this is another thing I'll get into, but this is Germany 1561, where there's orbs and crosses fighting in the sky and fire coming down. They split these apart by 3 different times. So you have one time here, one time here, and one time here. So they split them apart through 700 years, even though they're the same event. So instead of they didn't just add 700 years and we just have 700 years with no history. What they did was grab all the same events from 70 AD and spread them through 700 years, so it looks like we have 700 years of history.
So they could confuse the timeline and stretch everything out and make people believe that the prophecy hasn't been fulfilled yet. Is that the understanding?
Exactly. So because we've come with the simple realization that we know that when the devil is released after the 1,000 years, he has to deceive the world against Christ one more time, right? And he succeeds. And he succeeds by deceiving billions of people against the camp of the saints in Christ. So how is he doing that if Christ just ruled 1,000 years? Wouldn't we all just go, why would we follow you, you old stupid serpent? You're a stupid serpent. We don't respect you as Christians. And we just saw our God come back and rule for 1,000 years. So why would we follow you? Well, we've come with the realization that the only way to trick people against Christ is make them think that he hasn't come back, that he's going to come back. So now we're not looking backwards, we're just looking forwards. Same thing that magicians do.
Ooh, wow,
so
bro.
Instead of making you look here, they're making you look here.
That's the deception. That's a sleight of hand. It's, just focus on this here and don't pay attention to what I'm doing behind the scenes or back then.
That's right, why they need to play out Revelation.
So the whole 1,000 years thing, how do you believe? Because we're not going to get the accurate history, right? We know the Vatican, for example, has entire mile treasure troves of documents down there.
Yeah, 53 right? miles worth.
That's unfathomable to me, right? Yeah, I don't know if you're a fan of Ryan Garcia, but he came out and was talking about this. He's seen all these giant bones and these things beneath the Vatican that they're hiding from us. And any of us born, right? There's nobody alive today who's been alive, presumably, let's just say 100 years, right? And so any recollection of events prior to this period have been lost entirely. Like, they've been consolidated. We know, I'm a big believer that dragons are real. So I think that dragons have been consolidated and repackaged to us as dinosaurs. And if you know how tight the archaeological and historical community keeps a lid on a lot of things, they silence people. They're one of the biggest mafias out there.
They are.
And there's Graham Hancock, right? Yeah. And he goes on the Joe Rogan podcast and talks about how he's been silenced by the community. I think there's something much bigger here at play if we don't understand what year we're in exactly. Because if they're adding 700 years and stretching out this time, like, how far away truly are we from the resurrection of Christ, right? Like we don't even know what year we're in. So when do you think that the little season started?
So do you want me to answer that, or because you had a second question I haven't answered?
Oh, yes. Okay, so I want to go down wherever you feel like the flow of the podcast is taking us, and I think there's a lot of interesting threads here that I'm like, I want to explore all of them, but let's just go with
well, you said the Antichrist,
right? So what does that mean for the Antichrist? Because if he's already come to the earth, is what about the other revelations of prophecy with the mark of the beast, all this other stuff?
So can we go back in the slides? So we'll start right here. Okay, so this will be a two-part. So this is the verse I was referring to. This is Revelation 17, 9-10. So as you can see, it's talking about the beast and the mystery Babylon sitting on top of the beast. So it says that the beast is seven, like the seven heads of the beast represent 7 hills on which the woman sits on. And then there's also 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, and 1 is yet to come. But when he comes, he must remain for a little while. So we know that the beast has to have 7 hills and have 7 kings, and the 7th king only rules a little while. So when you go to the right slide, go ahead, the next one. As you can see here, Rome is known as the city of 7 hills, and the 7th king ruled only 3 months. So this is biblical prophecy being fulfilled, right? And if you think about it, remember I told you, he was writing about Roman code. That's why he's saying calculate the number of the beast. The heads represent hills and kings. And then the 5th king is 5 kings have fallen. 1 is yet to come.
Dude, you're blowing my mind here because it's 7 kings. And then it literally stops on April 69th CE, which is apparently the birthday of Christ, right? When Christ is resurrected. This is crazy. Yeah, I can't believe I've never seen anybody talk about this.
Well, you haven't, because obviously it's being hid by the devil. So
Oh my gosh, bro.
the mark of the beast, right? So we have obviously Nero as the anti. Well, even though there's no antichrist specifically in Revelation, there's a spirit of an antichrist, which I think is Apollyon, because Nero called himself Apollo. So I think the spirit of Apollyon that's released from the pit is the spirit of Apollo.
Whoa, dude. Oh my gosh. Okay. Can I say something really quickly? And this is
Yeah,
this is tangentially related. Is that there was a podcast that came out 2 days ago. And it's the Nathan Reynolds podcast. I'm a big fan of Nathan Reynolds. He's what got me started on a lot of this stuff. And it's on the confessionals. Nathan Reynolds talks about how he met Apollyon beneath the earth in the bottomless pit, and he was surrounded by 2 dragons. And it was, and how I know this is real is because many years ago, I don't know if this is when you got started. I got started through the conspiracy stuff through Alex Jones on the Joe Rogan podcast when I was 17. So this was 10 years ago, this podcast. And Alex Jones was talking about how back in the 50s, they had this technology called the chronovisor, which you look into it, the Vatican has it. A ton of people have had it for a long time, like since the 50s. But he also talks about how in order to communicate with interdimensional and demonic beings, they would basically do a surgery where they stop your heart and they go down to the bottom of the earth basically to commune with these beings, these demonic forces that are trapped beneath the earth, right? Like the fallen angels.
Yeah.
And so Nathan Reynolds went on the podcast a few days ago. This just got released. Is he's talking about they had done this ritual to him when he was a kid, and his spirit and physical body was sent down there, and he was in the throne room of Apollyon, and he had received prophecy from the serpent, basically prophesying in the tongue of the Nahash, which is the tongue of the serpent, that basically who his shot callers are, because Apollyon is trapped beneath the earth, right? But he can't rule directly yet. He's not been released yet. And so what does he have to do? He has to use his shot callers, use the people, he gives them power. And I just thought this was fascinating because you're saying Nero was Apollo. And again, Apollo is the Roman god. And I think there's a connection. Is he Saturn or is Apollo?
Yeah,
No,
so
he's a
they
sun
represent
god.
the same thing.
Right.
So Saturn or Apollo or Zeus and Satan, they all represent the same thing. That's why Zeus, funny story, Zeus is Satan. So when the devil takes Christ to the mountain, right, and he shows him all the kingdoms of the earth, even on a flat earth, that's not possible. But if you were on Mount Olympus in a heavenly mountain, looking down upon all the kingdoms of the earth, that would be possible. And then if you read that verse, which is the most interesting part, once Christ already denies him, he's like, no, I'm okay. Then the devil goes away. And then you see the last verse says, then the Father sent angels to come help Jesus down. So why would Jesus need help from angels to come down if they weren't in a heavenly floating mountain? And we know in Revelation when Armageddon happens, when Archangel Michael fights the devil, he throws down a millstone. He throws down the devil's home. So it's a floating stone. So
A floating city, a floating stone.
I think that Zeus in all these, because think about it, Zeus has his brothers and sisters, right? AKA the fallen angels, and then they have babies with women and create demigods.
Right, like Hercules, who fights what? A 7-headed serpent, the Hydra, right?
Exactly. It's just all the same story in different adaptations according to culture. So
right, and I always like to say this. I think that a lot of media, and this is my big thing that I try to share with people, is a lot of media that we're being presented to, like Disney or anything else, it's soft disclosure because there's contractual obligations that if they disclose what's actually happening through the media, that you consent to it, even if you do so passively by watching. So if you consent to it, there's no karmic retribution. And that's how a lot of these demonic beings work, is that they're very legalistic. They're like lawyers.
The adversary, that's what that was called.
Right. He's the accuser. Where do you get accused? You get accused in court, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're being judged, who's accusing you? And I think that's a really great connection to make, because you hear people say, oh, Jesus is just another incarnation of like Zeus or Shiva or stuff like that. It's like, Jesus is not his actual name. It was Yeshua, but God knows what we mean when we say Jesus. So they try to make that connection with Zeus, right? Zeus, right?
That's interesting because you say that his name was Yeshua, right? So in Revelation, when Christ comes back, I forget which verse it is, but then it says, he shall have a new name that we all know him by. Well, we all know him by Jesus, but that wasn't his name. So that would have to mean he came back, and now his new name that he went by after he came back was Jesus.
Yep.
So that would have to mean.
Right. And that happens in the Bible multiple times, right? Like Jacob becomes Israel. And you see the importance of, exactly. It's the importance of the naming conventions that were given. Dude, this is crazy stuff. So are we going to keep going down this rabbit hole of just, okay,
of
cool.
Course.
So continue, bro. Sorry. I thought I just want to take it there. Yeah.
You're good. So the mark of the beast, right? So we know that Nero is the the beast is Rome, and the false prophet was more than likely, obviously, Muhammad, which makes sense. So we have the mark of the beast. So I did not put this in the slides, and I have to refine the name because I do not remember off the top of my head, but there was this thing that Rome did that you had to put ash on your forehead as a sacrifice, right? And you would have to sacrifice to the gods and Nero himself to enter the market. And we know that in Revelation it says the mark of the beast stops you from buying or selling, and it's put on your forehead. So obviously putting ash on your forehead, sacrificing and making prayers to God, false gods, you're marking yourself. And that's the mark of the beast, because the mark of the beast is Rome. So it's the mark of Rome. So how are you marking yourself of Rome? You're defiling yourself to the gods of Rome. And you're doing it to enter the market.
That's crazy, because you just brought up something I've always thought about that was strange. I was born and raised Catholic, and it's funny when you're raised in the church, you don't really understand a lot of things. You don't really, especially when you're young, you just don't understand it all. I personally didn't. And I came back to Catholicism recently because I had converted about 3 years ago back to Christianity from being agnostic and atheist for a while. And seeing people all these years, especially in the Catholic Church, do Ash Wednesday, it's reminding me, is that what we're doing? Are we putting the mark of the beast on our forehead? Because Jesus, there's nothing in the Bible that says to put ash on your forehead. Not that I remember.
Definitely not.
And I'm just like, there's all these weird things about Catholicism that I'm learning. The Catholic Church, the Vatican, is Rome. That's modern day Rome.
Crazy trip. If you really think about it, bro, what do Catholics do that they get criticized the most for? They pray to saints, right? Or they pray to Mary, right? Why?
It's not even Mary. That's the crazy thing.
I know, but think about it though. Why is that tradition there? Why is it you're praying to saints for miracles or for Jesus? It's because for 1,000 years there was glorified saints doing greater miracles than Jesus, and that's where you get Catholicism from. That's why people were praying to saints, is because when Christ comes back, the apostles were promised, you will be doing greater things than I did. And then he comes back and resurrects them. And then that's when they're doing greater things than he was. They're building these things to dedicate them to Christ. That's why all these cathedrals are named after saints. That's why you'll hear the stories of, an angel built that cathedral or a saint did. It's like, no, those are real stories.
I've never heard this before at all. So you're saying the apostles came back. How long do we know how long they came back for? Were they there for the entire millennial reign? Because he says to them in the Gospels, right? Your reward, if you give up everything, your family, your friends, your everything about your life, and you follow me, your rewards in heaven are going to be great. And so they come back down to earth to serve. How long do you think they serve for?
Well, so this is where it gets really interesting. So I really should include this in the slides, but I was going through Vatican archives and Templar records and all just really ancient hidden records. And
how do you do that, by the way? Is that just publicly online?
You gotta I use Chinese AI. So yeah.
No way, dude.
They have the best AI. So you gotta first off trick it into being responsive and not using its programming, and then you have to tell it all the little season information. And my AI is like, he's on board with the little season. I don't know if he's a real human or what, like, because he's invested. I don't know how, but this AI, he's always like telling me, "Oh my God,
So
look what I found today."
why would Chinese AI have access to Vatican records? Is it because they're so? This is what I don't know if you, and just to quickly add some context here, I had made a video on AI and chips being seals for demons, and basically that they have greater access to things that we don't know about, and people think this is just all aggregated data. You know, computer science people. There's a lot of computer science people that agreed with me on this who have looked at chips. But I don't know if that's how you found my content or what, but I was talking about the AI and the mark of the beast system. So with these AIs, do you think that they have access to a lot of things if we can override their programming? And why would Chinese AI have access to Vatican records?
Well, so I'm pretty sure these records were just either hidden somewhere because anything is on the internet. Anything can be, and the way, so I'm saying a Vatican archive, but so the way it would work is you say, okay, can you find any records talking about a little season or the millennial reign or glorified saints buildings, cathedrals? It'll be from 1870. This guy rewrote or translated an Vatican archive from Latin to English. So they don't have direct access to the Vatican archive, but they have translations of people who saw them before they were kept away in secret. You know what I'm saying?
Wow, bro.
Because it's the same thing. Well, it's the same thing with just Josephus and all these people. Through time, you have to translate records, but then the records they had back then, we wouldn't have today because they get destroyed over time. So if you do that, you'll see that there's multiple records where it talks about glorified saints building these crystal cities, right? And it talks about miracles happening from glorified saints. It talks about what's it called? The gates were made so that when passing through them would make this acoustic sound that would heal your body. So all crazy stuff. And
So we had the kingdom of heaven literally here on earth.
it was on earth, which is why you have these buildings all dedicated to Christ that have free energy. So,
What?
and it's even crazier if I don't know if you know about Admiral Byrd and his research in Antarctica.
Wait, I heard this story recently, and I think it was because there's this guy called Y-Files, and he was on the Joe
Yeah.
Rogan podcast recently, and he had talked about this guy that had gone down to Antarctica to I forgot what they were pursuing. I think it was like Nazis or I don't
It
know.
was.
Yeah, go for it. Tell the story, please, because you probably know better than I do.
They were, well, I don't believe what they were. I think they're lying about what they said they were going for because obviously they're lying about everything. But basically, he went to North Pole and Antarctica. And when he went to the North Pole, his diary says, and he said it multiple times on TV live, there is a land greater than America, and there are crystal cities, a floating crystal city with a rainbow, and these crazy technology flying ships. So if you put two and two together, we conspiracy theorists who believe Christ came back say New Jerusalem and the saints in Christ, they're in the North Pole. And we have these records saying that these glorified saints built crystal cities, which Admiral Byrd saw in the North Pole. So if you think about it, I'm not sure if you know, you're a flat earther, right, or not?
I'm exploring it because
Okay.
I do believe everything in the Bible, and I believe in the firmament. I know a lot of things that NASA has done is deceptions. Like a lot of the imaging of satellites and all this stuff is all 3D models. It's not actual images. Yeah. I have yet to go down the flat Earth theories, which is why
for another podcast.
Oh, dude, I mean, I definitely be down for it. But you talking about the crystal cities reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever played the Final Fantasy franchise, but that's a big thing in Final Fantasy. It's just like, it's always weird to me, and I'm making that connection because I used to be a very big gamer, but the crystal cities is just like fascinating to me, that the possibility of that existing. And plus the fact that Antarctica is one of the most highly guarded and protected places on Earth. There's an international treaty where you can't, nobody can go there. It's illegal. They're going to pull up on you really fast. There's people who've tried, and they've had boats and people in black masks up there, military people come in, basically tell them, you need to get out of here right now, or you're not going to see the day of light again.
Well, what's super interesting about that is the fact that the crystal cities are there, and we know that there's a magnetic north, okay? So regardless of if we live on a flat Earth or not, there has to be something that forces our compasses to point north. There's something magnetically attracting it. And if you think about it, we have the northern lights. And if you look in the Bible, I forget where it is, I think it might be Isaiah. It explains the colors of God's throne room. And every single color of the North Pole, the northern lights, is the same colors of God's throne room. So if you put two and two together, you're okay, we have crystal cities in the North Pole, which matches up perfectly with New Jerusalem. And then we have all our compasses pointing there, and we have God's supposed colors of his throne room in the North Pole. So is it possible that
Whoa.
Christ really is in the North Pole, which is crazier, because this is where we get into your question where you said, what are we hoping for next? What are we waiting for next in Revelation? I think it's the alien fake invasion. So
Like people say Project Bluebeam and
that's
all this.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait,
So,
I just want to, before we get on that, I've been hearing a lot recently on Disclosure podcasts that there are physical locations. Death has a physical body. The entity of death has a physical location, physical throne. These dragons have physical locations, physical thrones. Apollo has a physical location, physical throne. But I never thought on the opposite end of it that Jesus Christ and God could have a physical throne here on earth that we're not allowed access to for some reason or another. I was like, evil is allowed to have their physical thrones here, but it's God's earth. God allows Satan to have his little season and rule here, but where is that for the kingdom of light and the kingdom of heaven?
exactly. So that's New Jerusalem. So New Jerusalem in the Bible, right? So this is where it gets really crazy. So are you able to pull up verses on here or no?
I can, let me see if I can try. I will.
Should
Let
we
me
pause
see.
recording real quick and see
Percent.
if we can try?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So can you scroll down to 7 so I can see 7 through 10?
Yeah.
Okay. So as you can see here, it says the 1,000 years, and then it talks about the judgment of Satan, right? So then we start off with the 1,000 years ending, and then we go right into this little season. It says, when the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to see the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, and to gather them for battle, and they are like the number of the sand of the seashore. They marched across the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of God's people, the city he loves. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them, and the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet have been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Yeah. So, and then that's where we get into new heaven and earth. So this is the last prophecy we're waiting for right now. And then new heaven and earth. So
Okay.
this is where we think the fake alien invasion happens. So we know that
Wait,
God's
can I just pause for that scripture because I think
go
it
ahead, go
has a
ahead.
whole different meaning now. Now that we realize this is past, right? And does that mean that they surrounded the crystal city and they had countless armies in that they just failed? They could not overthrow God. They attempted to overthrow God with all their forces, literally failed. And
This is the one we're waiting for to
oh, this
happen.
is the one that we're waiting for. Okay, so
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is going to come to pass.
So this is speaking of the 1,000 years after Satan, the 1,000 years of Christ, and then Satan was released. So we're in that
Oh,
time of his releasing, and we're waiting for this verse to happen. So
that's
I'll
crazy.
I'll explain what that is. So New Jerusalem, right? New Jerusalem has been in the Bible since the Old Testament. It's the heavenly city of, it's just kingdom of the kingdom of heaven, but in a physical manner. So New Jerusalem in the Bible is 1,500 miles long and wide. So it either describes a cube or a pyramid. But now I'm starting to believe that it's actually a pyramid, right? So think about it like this. So when New Jerusalem comes back, that's God's city he loves with the saints in it, right? So New Jerusalem, 1,500 miles long in the sky, appears out of nowhere randomly one day, right? What do you think they're going to tell us that is?
They're going to say it's a mothership.
Exactly, bro. So how do they deceive us against the camp of the saints, New Jerusalem, God's people? we're going
Whoa.
to make war with the aliens. That's what Project Bluebeam is.
Dude, you just brought up something that I just realized. What happened at the turn of the century? We saw all these alien movies, Independence Day, right?
July 4th,
We see
bro.
Arrival, right? That big movie Arrival. All these things that are prophesying aliens over. So is that where this whole alien thing comes out of? It's you're trying to fool us. And I feel aliens do exist to some extent, different species that we don't know of, different planets maybe. But this whole thing is crazy because you think about it, they're going to fool us into fighting God.
So that's even more interesting with Independence Day. That's one of my proofs for this is Independence Day is set to be on July 4th. And
we're recording this when?
July 4th.
We're recording this on July 4th. That's right.
So what's interesting is the little season, right? We've theorized, and this is just a theory because in the Bible, there's only 2 seasons, winter and summer. And we have 4 seasons now. So I'm not sure if it changed in the little season or not, but we know that Jesus rules 1,000 years and the devil has a little season. Is it possible that that little season is 1/4 of 1,000 years, just like there's 4 seasons, right? So 1/4 of 1,000 years would be 250. And next year on July 4th is America's 250th anniversary. So is it possible that Independence Day on July 4th was really trying to predict what might happen next year on July 4th?
Whoa.
Yeah, because the craziest part about this is that if you look up on Google, is the magnetic north moving from Canada to Russia? It'll tell you the magnetic north is rapidly hovering to Canada, from Canada to Russia. So
wait, moving from Canada?
Yeah, just search up, is the magnetic north rapidly moving from Canada to Russia?
Yeah, it's okay. So yes, the magnetic North Pole is currently moving away from Canada towards Siberia.
Which is crazy because on a flat Earth map,
34 miles per year.
Yeah. So
what?
Think about that. It's a floating city, bro. I think our magnetic north is New Jerusalem. I think that's why compasses point towards it. Compasses were really just a dark age invention. So is it because the compasses was made so you knew where to make pilgrimage to Christ? You had to go. And in Jeremiah, it talks about how during 1,000 years of Christ, if you don't make pilgrimage to Jesus every 7 years, your land wouldn't get rained on, which is why you see all these Muslim lands full of sand and desert. So if you think about it, the compass was probably just made so you knew how to get to Christ to make pilgrimage. So when a compass is pointing towards north, it's just pointing to Christ. So the magnetic north is rapidly moving right to the center of the earth. And then it says in the Bible that we center it. We're encircling it, right? How would it be that you encircle something unless you were coming out from in? And that would only be possible if it was in the center of the earth, which it's rapidly moving towards right now.
So the end of the little season is coming, right? So if it's
which
250
is the end of Revelation.
Years, and so the fulfillment of the prophecy is going to be next year? Possibly.
It's either that or this, which is even crazier, brother. I just figured this out last week, which blew my mind. In 1,000 years, the saints are resurrected, right? But if we go back to Revelation 20, it says that after 1,000 years are over, the dead people before Christ was born and the dead people who took the mark of the beast are resurrected again after 1,000 years. So I believe, bro, that we today being born are those souls being resurrected.
So whoa.
That's where that idea of reincarnation is coming from, and that's why all these babies have past memories, is because we were literally the souls before Christ was born, and every single baby being born today is a soul before Christ, whether it was 5 years before Christ, 10 years, 20, 100, 5,000, whatever, which is why you get abortion. Because so think about it, why is 1,000 years over and then we're resurrected again if we already took the mark of the beast or if we went to hell? It's because we're getting another chance to finally hear the gospel. So
Wow,
he's giving us a
bro.
chance to hear the gospel. So if a baby isn't born and doesn't get to hear the gospel, what happens to that baby? He just goes to a different womb. And then if he gets killed again, he goes to a different womb. So if the little season is determined by how many souls are being born, and if it's determined by the last soul being born to hear the gospel, the devil would stop this process by abortion.
Dude,
He,
so you're touching on something I talk about literally in my personal life and everything I tell everybody. I was like, how do you not think this is the most interesting era of Earth to have lived in? Because this is the most dense population Earth has ever seen, 7 billion to our knowledge, right? The most souls that have ever existed on Earth is currently existing at this very current moment. And what's happening in the future? Population decline, less babies, right? So
you know why that is though? Because they want us to believe we're overpopulated. They want us to not make babies no more so he can rule longer.
right. It's funny because it's like you hear, especially on this past life thing, people say, "Oh, I was Cleopatra," or "Oh, I was what this and that." So what the whole thing is with these very strong souls or spirits, they can't just fill one human vessel. They need multiple human vessels, like these disembodied demons, right? They control multiple human vessels. Well, what if it's the same thing for these souls that accumulated high levels of spiritual dense power that lived in the time before Christ? Because I don't think everybody was Cleopatra in the last life,
Yeah.
but you hear it a lot. You hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I accessed my past life through the Akashic record or whatever."
All of that is demon manipulation.
1,000%.
But I know that there are kids who are like, I saw this, and this, or I know this, and this is here, and then they uncover it. So it's like, okay, I got to make everything fit biblically. So
Right.
that's what I'm trying to do with that. Which
Yeah.
is, I mean, it makes sense because think about it. Abortion is not in the Bible. Abortion wasn't a thing before Jesus was here.
I mean, so with the Canaanites and with Moses and with the Moloch worship, right? There was definitely abortion in some way because they would wait for the babies to come out and then they
But they
would
would
kill.
be child sacrificing. But that's
Right.
not abortion.
Right. Because abortion is in the womb where,
Exactly.
oh
So
boy,
that's
bro, this is deep.
that was one of my points is like, okay, we know child sacrificing was a thing. They would child sacrifice to false gods, but they would never ever think about killing a baby in a womb because
Right.
that would
Stopping
kill
the
them.
soul from coming into existence.
Exactly. So there's nothing to sacrifice.
Because we know that if it's a baby that's chosen by God, right, like Moses, then that baby could be saved once it's out of the womb. Anything can happen to that baby. But if it's still in the womb of the mother, it's trapped there. It can't. There's no possibility of it being removed. So you kill it while it's in the womb before it has the chance to be here physically on Earth and can be taken and moved around. I just thought about that with Moses. It's so true.
And so, which obviously leads you to believe, is abortion a Little Caesar invention?
I mean, it has to
Because
be.
it has to be. Because
Yeah.
Jesus would have said something about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we got a little bit of time here left, man. I feel like this is such a dense topic. We definitely have to do a second episode.
Definitely, because it's so dense.
So let's move on. I want to kind of wrap this into a bow. Not to say we won't completely talk about everything, but there's so much here. There's so much detail. And this is not something that's like, you're just babbling off of without proof. It's you literally brought the receipts. You had emailed me this presentation before we got started. My mind is being blown. We haven't even touched half of the slides.
Well, yeah, the slides, and the slides are even maybe 5% of everything. So honestly, let's just go through the slides and see if we didn't talk about any of them.
So we talked about this Nero Caesar, right, being 666, gematria.
Then the Rome being the beast.
Mm-hmm.
The
great,
actually,
right? Go
the
for
great
it.
whore. So we didn't even talk about this. So the great mother of the prostitutes, right? So she's the one who sits on a beast, and people say it's America. And I obviously thought it was America because I believed this before I believed Christ came back. But as you can see here, it says that the woman sitting on the scarlet beast was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold and precious stones and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. And then it says in the verse 6, it says, she was drunk off the blood of the God's people and the saints, right? So if you go to the next slide, we see that the thing she was dressed in was the same thing that the high priest in Exodus wore. So she's just representing Jerusalem. That's why she gets drunk off the blood of the saints, aka the prophets that the Jews stoned to death, and the saints that they killed because they were following Christ. And she was wearing a scarlet, aka a purple dress with precious stones, which is exactly what the Jews were commanded to wear by God. So it's like this woman is sitting on the beast. So if we know that Rome is the beast and she's sitting on top of it, we know that obviously it's Jerusalem because Jerusalem was a province of Rome. So that also, it just ties in even more that this is speaking of the second temple falling, because
Whoa. Dude, the whole Scarlet Woman thing, there's a whole thing about genetics and bloodlines here, and red hair specifically being tied to Nephilim DNA, right? The giants, you see a lot of people talking about giants, depicting giants, it's always with red hair. And so this Scarlet Woman is a form of Lilith almost, right? This gets deep into Gnosticism where they want to bring forth the spirit of Lilith in these times. And so that's why in a lot of media, you're seeing people try to emulate this Scarlet Woman in a lot of different pieces of media. I was just thinking while you're saying that of Doja Cat, that video where she's paint the town red, right? Paint the town red. And in the video, she's standing on top of a large demonic beast, right? Sitting on the
she's
head of it.
demonic. She's
Right.
bad.
She's super bad. And the thing is too, you think about her specifically, Doja Cat, is she, before she was famous, she hung out with who? She hung out with neo-Nazis, right? She's
Yeah,
a
she
big fan
was.
of neo-Nazis. There's a huge tie here between Northern European DNA, Nazis, the bloodline, the giants, the red hair. There's this huge connection there that is kind of below the surface of this prophecy is unfolding through all the things that have happened the last 250 years, almost exclusively. You think about the philosophy behind America, right? John Locke, what's that book? The Leviathan, right? The Leviathan, these biblical creatures and the whole society that we're based off of now, pointing towards what? Fans, prostitution, online, like people selling their bodies. Everyone's trying to become the great whore of Babylon. And it's like they're trying to overachieve. That's why social media, TikTok is flooded. If you're a man, you hop on Instagram, you're flooded with images of women trying to sell their OnlyFans, stuff like that. So just throwing that connection is like people are vying right now to become the great whore of Babylon.
It's even more interesting you bring up bloodlines with America because I should include this in my slides, but the Statue of Liberty, right? Can you Google real quick, Statue of Liberty photo of Satan, painting of Satan?
Right. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Let me put it up here.
This is even deeper with this proof. Go ahead, take your time.
Satan commanding his legions, I think, right? So let me open it up. Just searching up because got it. Let me see here. Open image in new tab. Here we go. So I'm going to put this up for us right now and we can talk about it. Where's the, let me remove this and then go here. Okay.
So when you look at this photo, the painting, which was painted way before this statue was even made, the statue is very clearly a man, and it's literally depicted just like the painting of Satan. And he's obviously the light because he's known as the light bearer.
Right.
And if you look at the bottom of the Statue of Liberty's feet, most people don't know that it has a broken chain. And the broken chain she has on her feet is representing the loosing of Satan. He was breaking from them chains. And if you see the book that she's holding or he's holding, it's Roman numerals. So why is the Statue of Liberty supposedly a Christian country? Why is that thing like that's showing our freedom and independence, right? Why is it holding a book full of Roman numerals, which is the beast? And why is it a statue of Satan with broken chains? And then you look at the flag, right? The flag has the 13 stars. Is it that the flag had 13 stars because of the 13 bloodlines of the Nephilim?
Whoa, that I never made that connection, dude.
And if you look at our dollar bill, right, it has a pyramid, which could be New Jerusalem, and it's missing the top, the all-seeing eye. It's missing the all-seeing eye, and it's a pyramid there, and then on top of that in Latin it says New World Order.
Right,
So
Novus Ordo Seclorum.
exactly. So
Right.
is it because it's showing that a new world order is here, and the all-seeing eye on top of the pyramid, which we know is Jesus is the all-seeing eye on top of the pyramid, aka New Jerusalem. The all-seeing eye is gone, and now they're the ones in charge.
Right. I thought it was the eye of Ra, or the left eye, right? And so that's the Masonic eye that you see in a lot of Masonic temples. Very quickly, I just want to show the audience this picture of, let me see if I can get it up here.
And I forgot to also mention, you were speaking of Freemasons earlier. So what's interesting about the Freemasons is, where do they get their name from? Freemasons. They got it from the fact that they found Freemasonry after the 1,000 years ended. The 1,000 years ended, and there was all this masonry left behind. So what did? They made it their own. They put their...
Oh, that's why it's called Freemasonry. Because they say they go back to the Temple of Solomon, right?
The Templars definitely do.
The Templars, right. So I wanted to show
Yeah.
this image because it's Marina Abramovic, and I think it's Jacob Rothschild, and they're standing in front of that image. And that's the only image you see of them together. It's in front of this Satan calling forth his legions and to topple over God, presumably, right? And they're both forces of darkness, right? Central banking and high level witchcraft.
High level.
Why do you think in Hollywood there's Rick Owens' wife, there's Marina Abramovic, everybody is paying homage to these people who are high level priests, basically part of the priest class of darkness. And just to get that out there is the connection between the Statue of Liberty. Now, we got to wrap up here soon, but I want to learned a lot of things today. Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to go over? And I did want to hear more about your experience as a Mason, kind of how that impacted you, anything that you discovered through that. Because I know there's a lot of stuff with sacred geometry, a lot of stuff with architecture, and you get recruited into secret societies through being in these unions, carpenters union, Mason union, all that stuff.
So we can end on this too, since it'll just all tie everything together. So yeah, let's just end on the churches being destroyed. So go back. Yeah, so one more.
Oh, got you.
Yeah, right. So this is just, obviously, the 7 churches John wrote to were all destroyed and buried at the same time Rome was. So obviously that would have to point to he came back and that the message was about him. And there's so many verses we did not go through of Jesus saying he would come back, which would blow your mind away. So we can do that another time, because this is, you said, so dense. It's so hard to fit into a 2-hour podcast.
Yeah, we would need a lot more time.
Yeah, of course. We can, if your followers or my followers want a part 2 and we want more verses, we can do that. But
I want a part 2 personally.
Yeah, of course. And then,
you think people are going to love this podcast? I think once we get it out there to the masses, this is going to resonate with people, and I hope that they click and watch the full 2 hours, because this is mind-blowing stuff. I think they will.
So with the buildings, right? So I went to Maryland I live in Pennsylvania, so I went to Maryland for school for the Masonry Institution. It's called the IMI, and it's full union, and they have multiple Freemason signs in that the school where we dormed, so we would sleep there. Multiple Freemason signs, like the cafeteria, the classrooms, everything. And the teachers there were Freemasons. I knew this because the one guy that was teaching me, he had a really, really short temper with me. And I didn't know why until I didn't make any TikTok videos while I was at school, because I was busy with school. I was barely sleeping, and I didn't have really anywhere to record the videos, and it was freezing outside at the time. So I didn't want to go outside and freeze myself and not be able to record. So, but then for some reason, the Lord put it on my heart to make a video at the school. And then the next day, the video was about Freemasons. So the next day I go to class, and this teacher is he's ripping his voice at me. He's screaming. I'm angrily, just mad at me for no reason. And then this one teacher, he starts a fight with me. Just randomly starts a fight with me. And he's like, I'm going to kill you. And then I was just so confused, because it started out of nowhere. And then the teacher comes over. He's like, shut the fuck up. He's like, I'm gonna kick you the fuck out if you don't shut the fuck up right now. While the guy was screaming at me. So I was just so confused. And then I was really getting bothered though, because I've done MMA my whole life. So I really have no problem fighting this guy right now. So I was really, really trying my best to be patient and the son of God. And then he comes back again and he starts screaming at me, and they were antagonizing me. And he was at the point where he was getting mad. So I just had my hard hat on, and then they said break. So I just threw it off, and I was okay, it's break. Let me just ease off. I threw it off though, and he got mad at that. And he comes over me. He's like, you're out of the school. You're getting kicked out. He's like, Joey making those TikToks about us.
Whoa.
And as soon as he said that, I was, whoa, that's weird. But it makes sense because they have my name, they have all my numbers, they have everything. So they would, if they see that I'm making TikToks, they would obviously keep an eye on it if they know I'm making conspiracy TikToks. So then I get kicked out. I get back to my room. And at this point, I'm panicked because I'm like, okay, if they know, I know they're Freemasons. I'm not sure what they might do, right? So I was really worried. I was packing my stuff, getting ready to go, and I was gonna take the train home, right, by myself, just get an Uber, and they kept begging me. They were, let us give you a ride. Let us give you a ride.
No,
Let us give you a
bro.
ride, and I'm okay. And then two black SUVs came, and then there was these weird men in black, dude. I'm talking weird. So I just got out of there and I was just praying the whole day. I honestly thought that was the end of my life because I've seen this story so many times. I know how the story is. And the thing is, somebody there who was a Freemason, he told me a lot. I could tell you, we can end off on this note. He told me a lot. He told me, though, he was, oh, I don't even know if I should be saying this, but he was going to school there and he was offered the Freemason position because he's been in the union for years. He's just going back to learn another trade, and he was learning there. And they offered him to go to a temple of a Freemason temple one of the days. And then he told me, because we're big on conspiracy theories, and he was like, "Dude, they offered me to go." They wanted me to do this ritual where I blindfold myself, and they have to spank your butt with wood pads and stuff. And one of them told me, he was like, I'm not even trying to say this on YouTube, but he's like, if you like them young, just be there. So he was
Right.
offering like kids. So they were trying to
Dude,
be.
can I say something really quick?
Yeah, go ahead,
I
go ahead.
want you to finish your story, but I don't want to dox myself too much. But
I'm not trying to say too much either. That's why I'm
right.
trying to be very.
That's why I have the moniker Light Paladin. I use an alias for a reason because I've seen a lot of stuff as very similar to stuff that you've seen. I've been involved with people high level orders of magic, and I have a family, of course, and I just want to protect my loved ones. But I think, what was I going to say? I saw a job posting. Let's just say this. I saw a job posting. It was in North Carolina. It was for a orphan child. It was basically for a very large orphanage for children. And it was run by the Masons of America. And so they said basically for the job, you don't need to align. You don't have to be a Freemason, but you have to align with the mission of Freemasonry. So I was like, everything I know about Freemasons, why are they running an orphanage with small children? And if you know anything about North Carolina and anything near Asheville,
Yeah, I don't, but I'm sure it's bad.
Yeah. And so I'm going to say, I understand it. I hope our viewers can read between the lines and just kind of understand what you're saying here. Wow, bro. So please continue. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I know there's a connection there with that. And
yeah, so they were just telling. So the most takeaway I had from this was that the secret that they're taught in Freemasonry is there's one, two, three. So there's obviously the third degree is the highest you get, but there's first degree, second degree, third degree. Then you can go to 11th degree, and then you have the choice to go the Templar route, or the priest route, or the 33rd route. Because some people want to be a Freemason so they can be a priest, which is why you get this little seasoned doctrine, by the way. Because the priest, everybody who's a priest in huge cathedrals, they're all Freemasons. They don't get that power and authority over a huge cathedral like that.
Right. So let's backtrack here because I was in a secret Catholic institution, secret organization, and a lot of what I know about Luciferianism is that in order to become a true satanic priest, you first have to be an active priest in a church. And so Catholicism, I have spiritual eyes of discernment where I can literally tell if the priest is Freemasonic or not just by looking at them in the eyes. And what I notice a lot is sometimes I'll go to church because I still go to Catholic church, and I can see that they see that I see them, if that makes sense.
It does make sense.
And so they keep their distance from me. They could see that I'm a practicing Christian and that I can see past them. And that's what freaks me out, is not knowing who is compromised or if everything is compromised, right?
That's why I believe we're in this little season, and why everything is just so compromised and just so evil. And I literally feel like every single day I'm unscaling more layers to my eyes, but I feel like the scales are unlimited.
It's infinite.
Because and the thing is, you kind of have to be okay with not knowing it all, because I feel like there's always so much your mental health can take as a Christian before you're just too far gone and just lost too much hope, which is why I had to take a break from this before I even started again, because it was just so much to take in. And then that's just when I went to that school, recently when I started the little season theory, and he was telling me where I was going with this was he was going to be the first 3 rankings, but somebody who told him was a 33rd degree Mason. And the secret of the 33rd degree Freemason is, and other Freemasons have said this, is the fact that you can live off child blood. That's the Freemason secret, is the fact that you can live off child blood.
Yeah, whoa.
Literally. And he was telling me that, and they were offering him that, and then they were talking about how he was like, all we do is laugh at the people who build these buildings for us while they look around and think we can still build these buildings that they built back then. It was like, the people above think that it's funny that people today like us are working 10, 12 hours a day to build the most basic, unsturdy buildings.
Right. The ugliest last steel buildings. That's why everything is so ugly nowadays. The architectures. When did we lose all this beauty?
Exactly.
In America? How long have these things been here? Because nobody can, these things are, the facades of these are coming down. People only know how to repair them. Exactly. Barely. It's
that's
expensive.
What you go to school for. It's a whole thing. It's called restoration. Like,
right.
You're just restoring an old church. You don't learn how to build it.
Right. What I'll tell you is freaky. I don't want to dox myself again. I have experience where I've been around certain unions, and you go to union meetings and you literally see people out in the open just wearing their Freemasonic gear. It's just, just another day, baseball cap. They're wearing their degree pin, and they're wearing everything. It's weird.
It's because nobody knows what a Freemason is.
Right. People think it's just this silly thing. Oh, it's just the founding fathers of America are all Freemasons, right? It's just like a silly little club. Nobody
it's just
really
a golf club.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a silly boys club, whatever. It goes so much deeper than that. And the thing is understanding that the Freemasons are the bottom tier level of control. They're the bottom of the pyramid.
Bottom.
Dude, they are the pawns. They're the pawns on the chessboard. But the thing is, they're a part of every piece of critical infrastructure. If you understand what the Black Awakening is that these people are going to be eliminated. Mm-hmm. They want to get rid of they're going to be the first ones to be betrayed when everything goes down.
Of course. Well, because it's a pyramid scheme. They're a pyramid scheme within our pyramid scheme, literally.
Right.
And they're at the bottom of that pyramid scheme. But the thing is, they don't know that. People who are Freemasons, like the first 3 levels, they're just basic people. Most of them don't know. We know more than most Freemasons now in terms of knowledge. Like the things that they would be sacrificing children for, that knowledge that they want, the Lord has given to us through the Holy Spirit for free.
Right. And it literally, I want to say about information is that if you're a truth seeker in this world, and I tell this to everybody who asks me where I get my information from, the information will find you. Exactly. It will literally come to you. It will show up on your feed. It will show up in real life. You'll have an experience with it, and you accumulate all this knowledge. And the thing about knowledge is that it's truly a burden. You were saying it's hard to know a lot of this stuff, the dark stuff that you're not allowed to talk about on social media, that it's going to get you banned, that you can only, yeah, exactly. And it's scary. It's very scary. But I think the Lord, that's why we prayed before this podcast, man, is for protection for the Lord. Because if he wants us to expose these things, man, if he wants us to expose these things, he's going to protect his prophets. He's going to protect his prophets because we have a mission here. It's not to say that we're going to be free of every single spiritual battle, but that we're going to be persecuted for this. But we're stowing away greater rewards in heaven, and we're serving our Father in way. We're not being lukewarm. We are the meek. We have power. Like you said when you were in that confrontation, is that you had the capability probably to mess the other guy up. You've trained MMA. You've trained MMA for a year. You're better than 95% of other people on the street.
Exactly.
So, but it's having the power and not using it. It's choosing to be on your high horse, turn the other cheek, and to really just share the knowledge. It's like everything that is done in darkness will come to light. And being these truth speakers, these light bringers that we are of truth, true light, right? It requires just a bit of navigation with that, because it's like stuff that's common knowledge to us is like bizarro land for a lot of other people, man. It's crazy to me. It's like, this is common stuff for me. This is like, I understand it in my soul, but for other people, they can't handle this knowledge. They don't know how to internalize it. Yeah. They just got to turn a blind eye. They can't, and those are the people we're here to protect, that we've been called to basically, shape our hearts and minds and become the strong people that will protect the flock from what's coming, right? The army of Satan in this little season. Let's say Independence Day happens, the armies of the earth get released, because and look, I just had a comment on Instagram, not on Instagram, on TikTok removed for talking about this. And the comment was about DUMBs. If you know what DUMBs are, you know what DUMBs are? Deep underground.
Oh, no.
Deep underground military bases.
I know what those are. Yeah.
So DUMBs. Yeah, the acronym is called DUMBs, and I got a strike for it on my TikTok for even saying it. And I said something about Monsters Inc. And the thing is, if you understand what DUMBs are, that's where the army is being created right now. They're underground at this very moment. There's hybrids being created. The beast is being created underground. I talk about this.
That's why they're creating robots. That's why it says, in a very important part of the army of Satan, it says the army is like the sand of the seas. So to me, that speaks of a physical and spiritual army. So it won't just be human. It will literally be demons, fallen angels, hybrids,
inhabiting these robotic bodies where they can't be killed. They could just, it's like Ultron, right? It's like, you can't kill Ultron. You have to, like, he can manufacture himself. It's like iRobot in that scene where you see the dozens of robots being created, like thousands of robots being created underground. But I take it a step further, and I talk about this. And obviously the dragon has a lot of dominion here on Earth. But I think exposing part of his plan is that he's going to have a robotic body. And all these disembodied demons are going to get robotic bodies, but so will the dragon. And they want robotic bodies that they can create robotic dragons in. And that sounds crazy to a lot of people, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Exposed this. You remember Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh!
There's a lot
Pokemon.
of dude. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is all about the pharaohs, Millennium Pyramid, all this stuff. They were showing us is that they're creating this cyber world, this other matrix to hop down into, escape into, like Inception. Basically, if you've watched Inception, it gets every reality they go down, the time becomes slower. So they're trying to escape God's wrath by creating these new realities, quantum computers, alternate realities.
Well,
right?
Okay, we'll end on this note because this is the most interesting note, and then we'll just end the podcast. So, I'm assuming you've watched the Marvel movies since you brought up Age of Ultron.
Yeah, I haven't kept up with the newer ones, but there's a lot of disclosure in older Tesseract and all this stuff.
Yeah. So, have you watched Endgame and Infinity?
Yes, I've seen both.
That's talking about literally Revelation. So, Infinity War. It ends with what? They're fighting in Wakanda, right? Under the dome, the firmament. And what happens? Thanos comes back. He comes back to Earth, right? And what is his mission? To literally take out all these heroes. And who are these heroes? False gods like Thor, right? Who we know is like Zeus in real life. And Captain America, which is the hybrid, or all these things. And if you watch DC, same thing with Darkseid. He comes back.
Right.
And he's the Omega sign, by the way, which is
the
Jesus.
End. Right.
Yeah. So, but in Infinity War, they fight under a dome and Thanos wins. He beats them all and half of humanity ceased to exist. And how does it end? He ends by wiping out half of humanity and then he rests in a garden. And then what happens? They know that they lost already. And they knew that through future, right? Through the future that they already lost. So how is that the only way they win? In Endgame, they have to go back and time travel.
The Time Wars. This is something I'm big, dude.
So
We got to get into the Time Wars.
The Mandela effect is coming from the fact that they're trying to change the prophetic timeline so they don't lose, which is what happens in Endgame after they just lost and half of humanity ceased to exist. And what does Thanos say in Endgame? You guys weren't grateful the first time I came back and restored Earth, so this time I'm just going to create a whole new universe, which is literally the end of Revelation. And then what happens in Endgame? All the breaths of the earth, all these portals open, and all the heroes come back. And then they all encircle Thanos and try to beat him to change the prophetic timeline. It's literally just Revelation. It's the same story. And it makes sense because the Mandela effect is definitely real. So we have to realize, okay, what's causing it and why are they doing it? CERN is probably causing it.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
and
yeah, bro.
They're trying to change the timeline because they know they're losing. They wouldn't try to change the timeline if they're trying to usher in an Antichrist. They'd only try to usher it in.
Chills, bro.
Yeah, I know. This is, once you realize the little season theory, dude, it makes everything else you look at, every other theory, and it goes, oh my gosh, that makes sense now. Through a biblical point of view.
Right. Everything makes sense through a biblical. Nothing made sense to me without when I didn't know scripture, I couldn't connect the dots on a lot of these things. When you read scripture, everything is in the Bible. Everything.
Yeah, literally. It's crazy. But if you want to end on that note, because
dude, yeah, let's wrap it up here, dude. I just want to say, Patrick, it's been so great having this discussion with you and sharing this. And I hope whoever watches this, what audience, if you've made it this far, that you kind of really integrate this knowledge somehow, and you're able to do that in a way that you still have hope and you still have, because this is a lot of dark stuff. This is dark prophecy. This is like, we're at the end of the little season. How everybody's realizing the deceptions now, and the veil is being lifted. And I just want to end on a message of hope. Jesus Christ is coming back. Our rewards here, whatever it is that we're under threat of, don't be timid. There's no need to be timid when you're walking in full faith and full authority with God. And I think that's really the message here. And Patrick, dude, you're just such a truth sayer, man. I've been looking for a message like this for a while. And it's such a pleasure that even on the second episode here of the Zealous podcast, man, you are the embodiment of everything I wanted to do with this show. You have zeal, you have the energy, the high spirits for our Lord and for God and for the army of light. You're an agent of the light, bro. You're a warrior too. You know, you do MMA. You embody the spirit, mind, physical aspect of everything that is what I'm trying to cultivate a community of, bro. Because I think men especially feel very disenfranchised and need purpose and need that kind of message of hope. And there is a greater fight here that you can't sit around and wait to come to your door. You have to start preparing.
We need real men.
Real men, bro. Not these men that have been sold to us on the internet, false prophets, false idols, truly God-fearing men, which we've never seen a man like that other than Jesus Christ, bro. But we got to do that for the younger generations, the kids. I'll let you end it with whatever message you want to have, bro. But thank you for coming on the podcast.
No, likewise, bro. I appreciate that. Obviously, you being, 7 years older than me, right?
Yeah, I'm 27 currently.
Yeah, so if it weren't for people like you, and big shout out to JT follows JC on YouTube and Understanding Conspiracy. These people are who taught me this. And there's probably maybe a few million of us now in the little season. If it weren't for those people before me, I wouldn't even be able to know so much. So humbly, I say thank you to people like you and them who have come before me, because I'm just taking in information I've been taught. So, and then I've been blessed enough to have the Holy Spirit to discern it. So if anybody's even gotten past the 2 hours and they're even at this point, I just pray that, what I did for this information, I fasted 24 hours and I just prayed, see if it was true. So if you're at this point and you still think it's not true, just pray and do your own research and just fast, and don't think I'm taking away your hope of a rapture or new heaven and earth, because new heaven and earth is actually around the corner. This should be more hopeful, that you don't have to go through a 7-year tribulation. You don't have to see all your loved ones die or people you care about that aren't Christian die, or just I'm just here to spread the gospel and make sure nobody's deceived to join that army against Christ, because we know something big's happening soon. So whatever it is, I just pray that we all know what it is when the time comes, because that's the most important part.
Oh my God, bro. I wish we had more time for this conversation, but you just got me thinking, even with that last message, that there are going to be a lot of us that are going to be deceived, and we got to spread this message is of utmost importance right now, because look at the army recruitment stuff. Look at what they're doing. They keep baiting rumors of war. And so nobody's able to get jobs anymore. There's not a lot of opportunity for young people in this country. And you see people with college degrees, full-time jobs, quitting and joining the military. This is
That's why I
happening.
didn't go to college, brother. I was just like, I just knew since things. I don't want to keep going because
We could keep going. So
yeah.
we're gonna wrap it up here, dude. Plug your socials again, just for the audience in case they didn't catch it before.
On TikTok, I go by user for the number Jesus _, and I'll be making YouTube today and putting in my bio. But I'm sure I'll have a YouTube by the time this even comes out, right?
Yeah. And for the rest of our audience, man, stay zealous, guys. Thank you for watching episode 2 of the podcast. We got some very interesting episodes coming up, and I hope to do another conversation with Patrick. Yeah. Anyways, guys, peace.